Tons of news to talk about today. How about we start with we're continuing to see graphics cards pricing, at least on certain models, trending down. And the 4090 does not appear to be an exception. The prices had skyrocketed when there was a bunch of, AI GPU restrictions going on with China, so supply was headed that way. Now there's a 4090D version in China and all sorts of things. We got the super lineup coming in. The point is, it's looking like the global pricing of the 4090 is starting to retreat back down. This is a WCCF Tech article. All of my sources will be in the video description, but they're citing prices tracked, looks like in Germany here by 3D Center gathering this data, where we can see the trend line where it shot up all of a sudden, and now it's trending back down, but notice it is still above its MSRP pricing. And if you also look at like Newegg, it looks like we're starting to see some models available below $2,000, which, isn't really that exciting, but it is better than it was. So things are improving, but maybe still not all that exciting. Now, other GPU models have had prices reduced, which I've talked about in recent GPU buying guide videos and other recent news videos. The 4070, not 4070 specifically, but the 40 Super Series has in general increased the price to performance ratios at a lot of price tiers. AMD's had to respond a bit with some lower prices on the 7800 XT. In general, things getting a little bit better, if maybe not amazingly exciting. I'm about to flashbang you. Hey, white backgrounds. Anyway, Nvidia has launched a new GPU, the RTX 3050 6GB. Now, I didn't get a review sample. As far as I know, nobody else really did either. I don't think that they sent these out under their normal review program, but some people have gotten a hold of them and tested them out. This article here is from Tech Power Up, and I would suggest taking a look at their whole thing. But in general, this card is both not exciting and exciting at the same time, depending on if you fall into a specific niche. If you need a slot-powered GPU. So in other words, most graphics cards have a power connector that needs to plug into it in addition to the power received from the PCIe slot in your motherboard. But certain use cases in really small form factors of some types, and also in general, like some people will buy like an old Dell Optiplex Office PC for incredibly cheap and then want to just pop in a graphics card into it to make a very, very low budget gaming system. And again, those Office PCs are probably not going to have the kind of 8-pin power connector that you would need for a normal graphics card. This might fit that kind of bill. So for that specific niche use case, this might be kind of interesting. But other than that, if we just look at some like the performance summary here from this Tech Power Up article, we can see that if you set their 3050 6GB as a baseline of 100% performance, we can see that that it is significantly less powerful than things that don't cost too much differently. For example, AMD's RX 6600 is 59% faster in this testing, and they're not that far off in terms of pricing. Yes, the 6600 is a little bit more expensive, but you're getting a lot more performance for that money. And even Nvidia's 8GB 3050 is 28% faster. The main thing that's frustrating about the 6GB 3050 is that it probably should have been called something like a 3040 or a 3030 even. I mean, I don't even care what that, but just something to make sure people are aware it's really not the same thing as a 3050. If the 3050 8GB, the original 3050, is 28% faster, they're really just different products. So anyway, overall, I think this is, like I said, interesting for a very specific use case. But other than that, there's no reason why anybody who can power a normal graphics card should really be considering this too heavily or anything like that, unless the prices just absolutely plummet on the normal market. Now, with that being said, let's talk about some other things I'm finding particularly interesting going on right now in the hardware market. It's in monitors. So this year, I think, is going to be some big improvements in OLED monitors, specifically getting 4K OLEDs that actually fit in a normal desk space, okay? So previously, if you wanted to get a 4K OLED a few years ago, like I did, I bought a 48-inch LG TV, which on my desk is a bit much, okay? Like, if you can get far enough back from it, you're okay, but like, it's a lot. But it's looking like this year we will be seeing 32-inch 4K OLED screens at 240 hertz. And ASUS has announced that theirs is now available. They're the first one that they're producing here. But it's, I don't know, I might not grab this one. It is reviewing well. In fact, Monitors Unboxed has a review up on this one, which I'm in the process of taking a look at myself. Anyway, it does look pretty good. My one thing about this here, though, is that if you wait a little bit longer, then I think there's going to be some stronger competition from these from other panel makers. So if we look at this, this is a WCCF Tech article, but I think this slide here is taken from TFT Central, we can see up here, where we're looking at LG Display's technologies. So they have their OLED panels. This current ASUS monitor is a QD OLED monitor, so it's using a different panel. So there's going to be two different 4K 240 OLED panel technologies that then most of the monitor manufacturers will be, using in their screens coming out this year. This QD OLED tech will be coming first, and we're seeing these, reviews starting to pop up now. It's the actual availability seems to be a bit lower, but reviews at least popping up right now. Theoretically, it's available, but it's looking like in Q2, the LG Display's OLED version will be popping up. Now, one thing that's interesting about this is that theirs goes 4K 240, but can switch in dual mode into 1080p 480 hertz. So this would be interesting where you could take it as a, a single player, 4K gaming screen, but then go into super competitive 1080p 480 hertz mode. It's kind of interesting. And so I might wait until those are out as well and then look at the full review comparisons. And the other thing that some people might want to take a look at is as these monitors launch, do they feature the newer DisplayPort 2.1 or are they featuring the older DisplayPort 1.4? And currently, this ASUS QD OLED that's out right now is the DisplayPort 1.4. Now, it should still support 4K 240 through DSC, display stream compression. There we go. But it would be kind of cool to have the more forward-looking port and so anyway, I'm just curious if we hold off until Q2 if we start to see more competition in that space. So anyway, this could be a big year for OLEDs. Also worth mentioning that with OLEDs, with the burn-in potential, this particular ASUS monitor is, I think, offering a 3-year burn-in warranty, and in general, they're offering at least 2 years of burn-in warranty for their OLED screens. So anyway, that's one of the things I'm excited about this year. We'll have to see, like I said, how it develops. I'm tempted to just grab one of these, but then I'm like, if I hold off and see what the competition's coming like from the OLEDs, it might be a bit more interesting. So we'll have to see what happens. Now, in the handheld gaming PC space, this year we're seeing Intel models possibly making some waves, but the question is, are they actually going to be making some waves? In other words, are they going to be worth it versus the more established AMD-based APUs in these handheld gaming systems? The MSI Claw has been getting some attention using an Intel-based system with a Core Ultra 7 155H, and then they also have the Ultra 5, 150, 130 something. God, I can't get Intel's new naming scheme. It's probably on here somewhere. Anyway, the 135H, that's the Core Ultra 5 version. Anyway, on the more powerful variant, we're starting to see some reviews leaking out on these, but it's important to note that these are not, we're not past the official review embargo date, so it's possible that there could be driver updates or software updates that could change the actual launched version's performance. But in these early numbers, we're seeing reported here by videocards.com, although they seem to be taking a Bilibili video, a couple of different Bilibili videos, to get these numbers. We can see the comparison of the MSI Claw with, again, Intel's APU versus the ASUS ROG Ally, which has very similar, screen technologies and things like that, similar TDP options if you run it. And in general, it's looking like the Intel chip can't keep up. So Cyberpunk, we're seeing both models set to their max TDP, and that's a big thing to note, is these handheld PCs can be ran at different TDP settings, which have major impacts on battery life. So it's not always clear at which setting you should be testing these, right? But if you run them both at max TDP, it's looking like Cyberpunk was running at 44.8 on the MSI Claw with the Intel chip, but 59.8 on the ROG Ally. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, running at 720p high-quality preset at various TDPs, we're seeing if you match TDPs, at both running at their max, it's 49 versus 53, advantage to the ROG Ally. At 25 watts, 46 versus 56. Kind of interesting to me that they're showing the max TDP on the ROG Ally hitting 53, but then showing 25 watts hit 56. That seems strange, but then at 20 watts, we're getting that 53 again. So I'm almost wondering if something's a bit off there in these measurements, but whatever. The point is, at every matched setting, especially at the lower TDP of 15 watts, we're seeing 24 versus 42. So that is suggesting that we're getting a lot more power efficiency, especially down the curve on the AMD chip here. Red Dead Redemption 2, it's looking like you're seeing 49.2 versus 60.2 at the max TDP, and max TDP in Resident Evil 21 to 53 FPS versus 51 to 68 FPS. Anyway, so it's overall looking like the Intel chip might not be as competitive as we might hope. But like I said, these are very early kind of leaked results, and maybe there'll be more official drivers or software or something, or maybe in a wider test set of games, things like that. Maybe we'll see a more competitive offering. Now, also on the topic of Intel handheld gaming PCs, we're starting to see kind of an interesting thing here. So this article is mentioning Tulpar to launch an Intel Core Ultra-based gaming handheld. I have no idea if I pronounced that name correctly. But what's kind of interesting here, beyond just, hey, look, here's another one, and it's Intel, the design of it, as pointed out in this videocards.com article, is saying that this is identical looking like style to something called an MDOR eGPU, whatever, Intel Meteor Lake H chip. So, based handheld PC. So what's interesting about that is it looks like these, this could possibly be a design that is being, made available to multiple, manufacturers to kind of use the same design, which would match up to things that we see in like the mini PC market, stuff like that, where you can see the a lot of times different companies using the same little mini PC based design. Anyway, kind of interested to see where that goes. In other handheld gaming PC news, the GPD Win 4 8840U handheld should be launching by the end of February, and their GPD G1 external GPU enclosure also being talked about as well. I think the eGPU is featuring an AMD 7600 XT and can run at a 60 watt or a 100 watt mode, and it has kind of a switch to flip between the modes. And the handheld is kind of interesting in that it has the slide up keyboard option and things like that. So again, I just think that the handheld gaming PCs are pretty cool, and I'm just excited to see how there's been kind of this resurgence in interest and innovation in them ever since the Steam Deck launch. Obviously, the Steam Deck was not the first handheld gaming PC, but it does seem like to have kind of revitalized the space, and I think the convenience of them is certainly pretty interesting. I play my Steam Deck quite a bit. Now, in somewhat related news, how about the Nintendo Switch 2? Well, rumors had put it at a end of 2024 launch, but now we're seeing it looking like it will be shifted to a Q1 2025 launch. Now, this is based on a number of outlets reporting that it sounds like Nintendo has been talking to third-party game companies that are developing games for the Switch 2 and telling them about this shift in time frame. It's sounding like the stated reason is in order to have more games available when the Switch 2 launches. So I think they were concerned that if they launched at the end of 2024, they wouldn't have as much software available for it. So in order to have a better game library on the launch date, they're delaying the launch date. So that's the current information on that. Now, we still don't have a lot of solid information on what exactly the Switch 2 is going to be. There's been tons of rumors out there. There's a lot of evidence that it'll be using an Nvidia Tegra T239 APU. But, you know, honestly, like, it's hard to say what it'll actually be able to do, because the Nintendo Switch, the original Switch, did a lot more. Like, if you look at what Nintendo could pull out of that hardware in gaming compared to when you see the actual specs of the Tegra X when it was using, it was kind of impressive. So I'm just, you know, curious what will come of the Switch 2. And in other, I guess, console hardware news, it was a big story that that Microsoft might be just like, are all of their games going to go multi-platform? Are they giving up on Xbox hardware? And it sounds like absolutely not. It's really more that they'll be exploring more of their stuff going multi-platform, but not their big, gigantic exclusives like Starfield or the upcoming Indiana Jones games. It looks like for older Xbox titles will make the jump, and it's not going to be big things like Starfield, at least for now. Also, in regards to whether is Microsoft just going to become a game publisher rather than a hardware manufacturer, that also appears to be being squashed. Microsoft is confirming Xbox hardware updates this holiday, as well as next gen with a large technical leap. So they're actually claiming, where should I say here? Yeah, I think they're claiming it's the largest generational performance leap for their next-gen hardware ever. Now, that's a huge claim, and I have a feeling, knowing marketing speak, that it's going to be like, if you look at it from a particular point of view, right? So my curiosity on that would be, are they going to be going super heavy on AI? So if they put in some kind of a, neural processing unit, something like that, to go super heavy on AI features with their next generation console, that might be what they mean by the largest technical leap ever, going from like not having a bunch of AI to having a bunch of AI, right? Now, what that would actually mean for the end gaming experience, who knows? And I could be wrong, but that's my guess on what they mean, given the current, buzz in the industry, especially at Microsoft, like being super heavy on AI stuff. Now, as far as Microsoft hardware updates this holiday, I was trying to figure out if we had any more info on that. There's some information that there was a Series S with machine learning being planned, but that has been scrapped. That information is coming from a WCCF Tech article that seems to be getting the information from a Red Gaming Tech video. So this is all leaks and rumors rather than officially confirmed information and all of that. And I think it makes sense not to do some kind of mid-gen refresh on the Series S right now with machine learning. I just think that would be kind of confusing to the overall space. I think jumping into that makes a lot more sense kind of as a next generation feature to me. But anyway, in somewhat related news, how about PlayStation? But let's get back into more PC-focused stuff like my channel mainly focuses on. PlayStation wants to improve operating profit with more aggressive PC first-party games release plan. So we've seen big news that PlayStation's console-exclusive Helldivers 2 launched on day one on PC. And this is the first time we've seen a PlayStation exclusive hit PC on day one rather than having to wait a long time before hitting PC. And we've seen it be the most successful PlayStation game launch on PC. So with that in mind, to me, it would stand to make sense that they could increase, that rather than, waiting years to bring stuff to PC. If you're bringing it closer to launch date or on launch date, I think the sales would be a lot higher because there's just a lot more interest in that. And I don't think PlayStation should be too worried about well, if we launch day one on PC, people might not buy a PlayStation. And I'm sure there are some people who buy a PlayStation to play the exclusive games, even if they're mainly a PC gamer. But I don't think that's a huge part of the market. So I think launching on PC when people are excited about a new game launch would generate more sales that way than I think you would lose in people who, mainly game on PC, just maybe picking up a PlayStation to grab one of those exclusives early. Now, I'm the kind of person who did that on like PlayStation 4. I bought a PlayStation 4 basically just to play Bloodborne. So people do that kind of thing. But anyway. So in other news regarding software and game stores and all that, it's looking like Epic Game Store users have grown in 2023 thanks to the success of Fortnite, but the third-party sales are apparently dwindling. And I think Epic's goal here is to try to turn it into a larger, store beyond their own games like Fortnite to be more of an actual Steam competitor. But the numbers are maybe not looking super impressive for that use case. I don't know. I think that there is definitely room for improvement on the Epic Game Store front in terms of trying to reach feature parity with Steam. In which case, then maybe people would be more interested there. I mean, it's really kind of conflicting to me because, like, as a PC gamer, like, to me, it's just way more convenient to have everything in one place, and most of my stuff is already on Steam, right? I do buy things on Epic from time to time, but, like, that's usually just because it's not available on Steam, which is more frustrating than, like, because I'd rather buy it on Epic, right? So I don't know, but I'm also just kind of against monopolies in general, so I think having competition for Steam is only a good thing. But I don't know, it's hard for me to see what would make me actually prefer to buy something on Epic if I could just get it on Steam, especially now that I play a lot of stuff on my Steam Deck and things like that, where it's just a lot more convenient if it's on Steam. But anyway, let's move on to some other stuff like software updates and things like that for Nvidia and AMD. Nvidia is launching a Chat with RTX feature, which is a localized AI chatbot that, rather than running in the cloud, is running on your own RTX GPU. And it does need to be a 30 or 40 series GPU. Sorry, RTX 20 series users. Now, this seems kind of interesting. Its main gimmicks compared to other chatbots again seems to be that you can again run it locally on your own PC and give it access to your local files as something that it can analyze and work with, as well as well, I mean, I guess that's kind of the main thing. Anyway, seems to have kind of a somewhat simpler to use interface than some other things. Anyway, I'm not honestly too into all this AI stuff myself, so I'm probably not too qualified to jump in on how exciting this is for people who are using these things more. But in that kind of vein of things with, all of this machine learning and CUDA, a lot of things are programmed with CUDA apps. There was big news last week that AMD GPUs now have like I guess you would call it a translation layer with ZLUDA that can now make CUDA programming run on AMD hardware without needing it to be, again, programmed specifically for AMD hardware. So this translation layer looks like it had originally been funded with some AMD support, but then they discontinued the support. And then the developer just made it available as an open source software project, which is pretty interesting. And there does seem to be some evidence that it works pretty well, at least in some applications. I don't think it's absolutely perfect yet. But again, I'm more into gaming performance of graphics cards. I'm not that into the productivity side of things or any of this, so I don't have a strong opinion on how well this works or anything or testing it out myself. But I'm imagining some people will find this very interesting if you're trying to use CUDA-specific apps on AMD hardware. Maybe take a look into this and see if that does something for you. Now, AMD has been expanding FSR3 support very rapidly now. We're now seeing it added to Starship Troopers Extermination, and it will be coming soon to the Thaumaturge, bringing the overall FSR3 support list up to 14 games if you count the Thaumaturge, which hasn't actually launched yet. So after the initial two, where we had a long break before we got everything, we then got a better version of FSR3 that has now been, I would say, expanding very rapidly since then. So pretty cool stuff. I hope to see this support list continuing to grow. Now, if you're impatiently waiting for it to be added to games, you can mod it into a lot of games. And with that in mind, I thought I'd report on this. So the Cyberpunk FSR3 mod, again, it's not in the game yet, although it has been announced that it will come eventually officially. But in the mods, there's some ghosting issues, especially when vehicles are driving. It kind of has a trailing ghosted doubled version of the vehicle kind of behind. Apparently, there's now a mod that fixes this. However, it seems to do it by disabling the frame generation on that bottom section of the screen. So I haven't tried this out for myself yet, but it sounds like that could cause its own artifacting where you see that part of the screen updating at a lower refresh rate, right? A half refresh rate of the frame generation. Which when we saw things like that in like the avatar implementation of frame generation with FSR3 over the menu areas, I did find that pretty distracting personally, but I thought I'd throw that out there. There's now mods for the FSR3 mods, so that's all pretty cool. Now, it's looking like AMD's Ryzen Master software has been updated to not only support the Ryzen 8000G series, but also to allow Curve Optimizer adjustments to take place without restarting the PC, which does sound like a major convenience feature if you're trying to dial in curve optimizations without having to restart the PC a bunch to do that. So that's pretty cool. And I think this is pretty big news. It's looking like Anti-Lag Plus will be coming back soon. Remember, Anti-Lag Plus was a driver-level latency reduction feature that is more advanced than the anti-lag, which is still there, but it got removed because it was causing bans in games due to anti-cheat flagging it as a game ban. Now, most of those game bans, I think, did get reversed eventually, and AMD helped, make sure that that happened, but it was a very frustrating and frankly rather embarrassing situation. When Frank Azor was questioned, is Anti-Lag Plus being reintroduced? He says, yes, coming soon. Now, also, you could read more into this. It also says it's been a while since it was removed, or any info whether the FSR upscaler will be improved now that FrameGen has been released. If you took that second chunk here, any info whether the FSR upscaler will be improved now that FrameGen is released as yes, coming soon, that to me would be more interesting personally. However, he's probably just replying to Anti-Lag Plus, but technically he's saying yes, coming soon to this whole statement. In other words, I would really like FSR upscaling to get improved, and to me that would be more exciting than the Anti-Lag Plus, although I want that too. Anyway, I'm probably reading too much into that, but this is one of those things where it's like, are you going to do this or that? Yes. It's like, which is it? Okay, anyway. Whatever, let's move on. Speaking of super resolution technologies, though, it's been uncovered that Windows itself is experimenting with a super resolution being applied. This is only in preview builds and may or may not actually end up being an official thing, and it's unclear how good this would be in games and or apps. But it would be interesting if we did get a high quality, super AI super resolution technology that was more like, I don't know, just a default thing rather than being this kind of arms race from individual GPU manufacturers. In other software update news, MSI Afterburner and RTSS have been updated in a way that will make them no longer compatible with Windows XP, but has added support for some new features, including an Nvidia Reflex-based latency monitor and frame rate limiter, which is pretty interesting. Of course, you would need an Nvidia GPU to enable that feature. Although I'm curious, speaking of the Anti-Lag Plus issues that we saw with the game bans, I'm curious if trying to implement this kind of Nvidia Reflex through this third-party software could trigger anything like that. I don't think it necessarily would. I don't know enough about how that would work. But I'm curious. Anyway, but I thought that was an interesting update. I saw another interesting project being worked on to allow Unreal Engine 5 to run in a browser using WebGPU with multi-threaded rendering and asset streaming of some kind. Now, it's unclear if this would work well enough to actually like game in your browser on Unreal Engine 5, but I thought it's at least a cool project worth mentioning. And then In another interesting software update, Intel is working on an adaptive sharpening filter for their Lunar Lake Xe2 graphics architecture, and it's looking like what this one would do is more intelligently apply sharpening to certain areas of the screen, like maybe objects in the foreground rather than the background, things like that. To sharpen the things that would benefit from the sharpening, but maybe not sharpen the things that get, not improved or actually made to look worse by applying the sharpening filter, which is kind of interesting. In other Intel news, we're seeing that there's probably a 14900KS coming out, which shouldn't surprise anyone. However, it's looking like the early leaks of it are showing it hitting 400 plus watts of power consumption, and I just, oh my, why? That's really just, what? Okay, that's my reaction, just laughing. Anyway, let's move on. Apparently, we are expecting it to launch probably in March. And so if you need a new space heater for your room, you could get one that hits 6.2 gigahertz. So there you go. Now, an interesting story, I'm seeing RTX 2080 Ti GPUs, which are 11 gigabyte graphics cards, being modded by replacing those memory chips with double the capacity to hit 22 gigabytes of VRAM, which could be interesting as a budget AI GPU. So apparently these are coming in at about $500 as a 22 gigabyte GPU. Now it'd be interesting to see how that functioned in gaming, although honestly for the kind of settings you'd be running on a 2080 Ti, which is going on, what is that, about 6 years old at this point, its original 11 gigabytes is honestly probably fine for the settings you'd be actually running in games, where the large AI models often want to have 16 or more, so that's where the 22 could be, I think, more interesting. But again, this is kind of modded, used GPUs, so of course, make of it what you will. That's certainly not an official Nvidia product. This is definitely mods being released as third-party stuff. And some other GPU model news, there is an XFX Radeon 7800 XT with a white GPU cooler. Looks like it should be available soon. We're seeing Sycom systems showing off an RTX 4080 Super with Noctua fans on an AIO coming from a liquid cooler with 2 spirit levels to check for any GPU sag or anything like that. So that looks kind of interesting. And we're seeing Gigabyte getting set to launch an RX 7900 GRE gaming GPU. And hey, my friend is calling me needing a ride from so I'm gonna go. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have an excellent day.